New details this morning about the death of actor Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy. Investigators revealing they believe Hackman died of heart disease with complications from Alzheimer's, and he possibly did not know his wife had died from the rare hantavirus in the same home 1 week prior.
And we are learning more about the investigation into the death of Gene Hackman and his wife and their dog. New Mexico officials revealing both of the couple both died of natural causes, but these deaths were 1 week apart.
Gene Hackman, Hollywood's untouchable legend, vanished without a trace. No struggle, no crime scene, just silence. Then, his wife, Betsy Arakawa, the only person who might have known the truth, was gone too. Coincidence or calculated execution? Was Hackman silenced by forces lurking behind Hollywood's golden curtain? Some whisper of invisible assassins, undetectable poisons, and secret meetings in shadowy backrooms. Others believe he uncovered something too dangerous to reveal.
Investigators have revealed the causes of death for Oscar-winning actor Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa.
The truth isn't resting 6 feet under. It's buried beneath the scorching New Mexico desert, waiting to be unearthed. Today, we expose a chilling theory that may change everything you thought you knew about Gene Hackman's death. The isolated sanctuary. Deep within the vast desert of New Mexico, Los Terros stood as a quiet refuge, a place where the weight of fame could be left behind. For Gene Hackman, a man who had twice stood victorious on the Oscar stage, this village became his final retreat. Weary of flashing cameras and endless interviews, he and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, sought solitude, turning their home into an impenetrable sanctuary. Their 2-story wooden house, surrounded by dry, golden grasslands, lacked high fences, security cameras, or guards. The only barrier between them and the outside world was silence. A silence so absolute that it consumed every rumor, every whisper about them. Since the early 2000s and 10s, Gene had seemingly vanished from the public eye. No interviews, no new projects, only a quiet existence with Betsy, the woman who had stood by his side for decades. He was rarely seen in town, and when he did appear, it was only for fleeting moments. A quick stop at the local store, a nod of acknowledgement, then back into the shadows. Betsy was just as elusive. They lived as if they were ghosts of their own choosing, passing through life unseen. But when that silence suddenly deepened, it became something far more unsettling. Authorities discovered them in the home they had so carefully shielded from the world. No signs of forced entry, no shattered windows or broken locks, no evidence of a struggle. Gene sat in his favorite wooden chair near the living room window, a book resting near his hand as if he had simply paused mid-sentence. Betsy lay just a few steps away, her head resting on the armrest as though she had only meant to close her eyes for a moment. Their small dog, forever loyal, curled peacefully at their feet. Everything was still. Too still. There was no overturned furniture, no scattered belongings. The air carried no trace of gas or any foreign substance. It was as if time had stopped at the exact moment of their final breath, leaving the scene frozen in unnatural tranquility. To the investigators, the most unsettling detail wasn't what they found. It was what they didn't. No signs, no clues, nothing.
The cause of death for Miss Betsy Hackman, aged 65 years, is hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. The manner of death is natural.
The Santa Fe police quickly ruled out burglary, accident, or any visible cause. Jean and Betsy had simply ceased to be. Yet in a place like Los Terros, where silence had always been a form of protection, this kind of silence was something entirely different. A storm of whispers. News of Gene Hackman's death did not remain trapped within the quiet corners of Los Terros. It slipped past the desert's borders, carried on the wind like an unshakable presence. It drifted through roadside cafes, old newspaper stands, and dusty markets where stories were often exchanged. But this was no ordinary tale. This time, the name spoken in hushed voices belonged to a man whose very presence had once commanded the silver screen. No one knew exactly where the first whisper had begun. Perhaps it was a medical examiner murmuring to a colleague, or maybe it was a neighbor who had glimpsed flashing police lights through a window. But once the words were spoken, they could not be contained. The desert was known for its secrets, stories of disappearances, abandoned homes, and bodies found without a single mark yet, with eyes wide open in horror. Now, Gene Hackman's name was tangled in that web of mysteries, and the whispers quickly grew into something much louder. At first, 3 main theories emerged: murder, an unknown intruder, or a fatal gas leak. Each one carried its own chilling implications. Those familiar with the history of New Mexico knew all too well that the desert had long been the backdrop for unexplained tragedies. People had vanished without a trace. Homes had been left behind as if their owners had simply stepped out and never returned. Bodies had been discovered in places no living soul should have reached, with expressions frozen in inexplicable terror. So when Gene Hackman's death was thrust into that same eerie landscape, it became more than just a tragic loss. It became an obsession. Santa Fe had seen its share of headlines, but this was different.
Both individuals tested negative for carbon monoxide. An initial interrogation was conducted of Mr. Hackman's pacemaker. This revealed that his last event was recorded on February 17th, 2025.
The usual travel pieces about charming restaurants and scenic desert vistas had been replaced with something far more chilling. Reporters flooded the streets, their cameras capturing more than just landscapes. They sought answers to a mystery that refused to unravel. Gene Hackman, Betsy Arakawa, and their faithful dog, 3 lives extinguished in absolute silence. No forced entry, no violence, no desperate calls for help. That afternoon, under the glare of flashing cameras, the Santa Fe police held their first press conference. A stone-faced official stepped behind the wooden podium, his voice steady, controlled. No visible injuries, no signs of trauma, no forced entry. His words were meant to bring clarity, but instead they sent waves of unease through the crowd. If no one had harmed them, if nothing had broken in, then how had they both perished so suddenly? The more the police dismissed the theories, the wilder they became. Some whispered of a phantom intruder, an expert at slipping in and out of desert homes without a trace. Others spoke of the land itself, of curses whispered across generations, of rituals once performed in Los Terros that left a lingering darkness. But among all the speculation, one explanation stood out: the silent killer that had claimed countless lives in remote places like this. Carbon monoxide. The idea made sense. A gas leak, seeping undetected through the house, lulling its victims into eternal sleep. No panic, no struggle, just quiet surrender. It was a theory that soothed the chaos, a simple, scientific answer in a case riddled with uncertainty. The Santa Fe police wasted no time calling in environmental experts and forensic specialists. State-of-the-art gas detectors were deployed inside the Hackman home, scanning every pipe, every vent, and every possible source of contamination. The gas stove was the primary suspect, its connection pipe showing a small leak, but not enough to be fatal. The heating system was next, each duct carefully examined with thermal cameras, searching for cracks or hidden leaks. Nothing. The water heater, a few minor faults, but nothing that could have released a deadly dose of gas. As the day stretched into evening, anticipation thickened. Then, the first autopsy report arrived. No carbon monoxide. Blood tests, lung tissue analysis, and neurological scans, all clean. No poisoning. No environmental toxins at dangerous levels. The theory that had provided a sense of closure was suddenly shattered. That very night, the New Mexico government released an official statement. No traces of carbon monoxide detected. No environmental hazards found.
Autopsy examination and full-body postmortem CT demonstrated no findings of trauma internally or externally.
The internet erupted. If not gas, then what? New theories spiraled out of control. Some speculated about an undetectable toxin, a chemical so advanced it bypassed standard forensic tests. Others whispered of slow-acting poisons, slipped into food or water over time, leading to synchronized deaths as if part of a sinister plan. Conspiracy blogs spoke of biological agents, the kind used in high-level assassinations, compounds engineered to vanish without a trace. Shadows behind the spotlight. Gene Hackman was not just a Hollywood actor, he was an institution, a living icon whose name alone conjured images of a golden era where raw talent overshadowed commercial spectacle. His performances in The French Connection and Unforgiven were not merely roles, they were embedded in the collective consciousness of film lovers worldwide. Yet behind the accolades and the grandeur of the silver screen, there existed a life veiled in secrecy, a labyrinth of whispers and unspoken truths. During the 1970s and 80s, when Hackman ruled Hollywood, he was more than just an observer of the industry. He was a witness to its underbelly. The parts unseen, the hushed meetings, the coded conversations behind closed doors. Hackman had a front-row seat to the side of show business the cameras never captured. The glamour and glitz masked a world of backroom dealings, quiet arrangements, and silent disappearances that were never reported. It was rumored that Hackman, with his sharp instincts and penetrating gaze, knew far too much. He had seen the invisible strings that pulled the industry, the unspoken pacts that shaped careers, and the secrets that some believed were best left buried. When news broke of Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy Arakawa's sudden demise, it sent ripples through Hollywood.
The mysterious deaths of Hollywood icon Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy, a classical pianist, left many unanswered questions.
Colleagues were approached for statements, directors who had worked with him, actors who had stood beside him in legendary projects. But an eerie silence followed. No tributes, no heartfelt condolences, just avoidance. Those who had once praised him now refused to speak his name. The collective refusal to comment was more unsettling than any statement could have been. It was as though Hackman's departure had unlocked something that needed to remain undisturbed. Speculation mounted. Had Hackman truly chosen to disappear from the limelight, or had he fled something far more menacing? His decision to retreat to New Mexico, far from the city that had once worshipped him, suddenly seemed less like a peaceful retirement and more like an escape. Was it possible that the knowledge he carried had become too dangerous? Some whispered about an unseen force within Hollywood, an entity that ensured its secrets stayed secret. Hackman had seen too much, and in a world where information was power, some information was too powerful to possess. And then there was the so-called Hollywood curse, a whispered legend in conspiracy circles. Some wondered, had Hackman become the latest name on that list? Had the past finally caught up with him, ensuring his voice would never speak the secrets he held? Yet, if Gene Hackman embodied the battle between Hollywood's brilliance and its hidden darkness, Betsy Arakawa stood in stark contrast. From the moment she became part of his life, she stepped away from the world of public adoration. A once talented pianist, she faded into quiet companionship, rarely seen, even more rarely heard. To most, she was simply the devoted woman behind the legend, her presence as delicate as a whisper. But the further she withdrew, the more intriguing her silence became. Friends described her as kind but distant, always carrying a subtle weight behind her soft smiles. And then there were the fears, unspoken but felt. A few months before her and Hackman's fateful end, Betsy confided in a trusted friend over the phone. She was being watched, she said. Strange sounds in the dead of night, unmarked letters with no return address, a suffocating sense that she was never truly alone. When pressed to alert the authorities, Betsy had simply laughed it off. "I'm just imagining things," she had said. But was she? And then came the strangest revelation of all. Hours after the news of their deaths broke, an anonymous call was placed to the Santa Fe police.
Well, New Mexico police say the deaths of Gene Hackman and his wife now appear suspicious enough to warrant a full investigation.
A woman's voice, frail, shaking, delivered only one cryptic message before the line went dead. Betsy wrote a letter, a final confession. Find it. But no such letter was ever recovered. This lone piece of information sent theories spiraling. Some believed Betsy had once been entangled in a complex financial web long before meeting Hackman, a history she had spent decades trying to erase. Others claimed she had unwittingly stepped into something much larger, a hidden conflict with powerful figures who ensured she would never tell her side of the story. If Betsy Arakawa had been the key to the truth, that key had now been lost forever. She had vanished into the silence of the New Mexico night, her secrets swallowed by the sands. The morning their bodies were discovered, the desert seemed unnaturally still. It was a puzzle with missing pieces, an enigma as vast as the desert itself. And as forensic teams scoured the Hackman residence, the mystery only deepened. No struggle, no sign of external injury, no evidence of intrusion. Toxicology reports ruled out gas, carbon monoxide, or any other common poisons. The initial theories crumbled under the weight of absence, an absence of anything that made sense. After weeks of tireless effort, the Santa Fe police made a reluctant admission. They had no concrete cause of death. The case would remain open, but deep down, even they understood. Some mysteries refused to be solved. Some truths were never meant to be uncovered. Hackman's family chose silence. They rejected media requests, refused interviews, and turned down any attempt to dissect the life he had so carefully built. And strangely, so did Hollywood. The industry that had once celebrated him, that had showered him with praise and recognition, now acted as if he had never existed. Memorial tributes aired without his name, retrospectives glossed over his achievements. It was as if he had been deliberately erased. The hidden shadows of Hollywood. His passing became an unspoken taboo, a subject that hung thick in the air like a storm waiting to break. Social media erupted in a frenzy of speculation, spinning tales darker and more intricate by the day. Some swore Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa had been the targets of an impeccably executed assassination, flawlessly masked as a suicide. Others were convinced they had been poisoned over months, the toxin engineered to vanish without a trace. Whispers of clandestine forces pulling Hollywood's strings for decades gained momentum. Had Hackman stumbled upon something forbidden? Had he seen what was never meant to be seen? The unsettling pieces, Betsy's quiet paranoia, the cryptic anonymous calls, the eerie silence of those who had once stood beside Hackman, merged into a puzzle that refused to be solved. His death did not mark the end of his story. It was the beginning of something more sinister. Hollywood had lost one of its brightest stars, but in his absence, a darker legend took shape. His legacy was no longer just his films. It became the mystery that lurked in the shadows, whispering secrets into the desert wind. No one remembers exactly when Hackman's home became part of Los Carrillos' dark folklore. But since that fateful discovery, a peculiar stillness had swallowed the place whole. Locals began murmuring, piecing together fragments of strange occurrences in the days before the tragedy. An elderly couple living nearly a mile away insisted they had seen something unnatural. Blue lights flickered in the second-floor windows, motionless and unwavering for nearly 10 minutes before vanishing into the night. At first, they thought it was a passing car's headlights, until they realized the lights never moved. A rancher delivering hay to the property recalled an unsettling encounter. He had spotted Betsy Arakawa standing motionless on the porch, staring into the desert's vast emptiness. Her expression was hollow, distant. He greeted her, but she did not respond. She simply stood there, her gaze locked on something unseen. as if she were listening to a sound only she could hear. The Santa Fe police, after their initial reports, withdrew from the case. No follow-ups, no press conferences, no explanations. The silence was deafening. The Hackman family severed all communication. Those closest to him, the colleagues, the friends, the neighbors, fell eerily quiet, as if they had been given a warning. Online forums, from Reddit threads to underground blogs obsessed with Hollywood's darkest secrets, turned Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa into symbols of something far more sinister. Their quiet retreat into the desert was no longer seen as simple seclusion. Theories swirled about the price of knowing too much. Hackman's lifetime of awards and accolades suddenly seemed like a mere disguise, a mask concealing something far more dangerous beneath. His house still stands, abandoned, unclaimed. No one dares step inside. It is neither for sale nor for rent. It is simply there, as if waiting. At night, when the desert winds scream through the shattered windows, some say they hear whispers, fragments of voices carried through the air. Some swear they have heard Betsy's soft murmurs. Others, Hackman's deep voice, uttering something just beyond comprehension. But always, one phrase echoes clear: not safe here. Beneath the thin veneer of official statements lay scattered details that refuse to align. A phone call was placed at precisely 2:37 a.m., a full 48 hours before Hackman and Betsy were found. The emergency switchboard received a whispered, frantic message from the Hackman landline. A woman's voice, trembling, barely audible, spoke 5 haunting words. They found out too late. Then silence. The call ended abruptly. Authorities later confirmed the voice belonged to Betsy. But who were they? And what exactly had been found out? No one could or would answer. And then there was the safe. A large, heavy vault in Hackman's study that had never been listed in any known inventory of his possessions. When investigators opened it, they found nothing. The inside was completely empty. There was no sign of forced entry. No one knew what had once been inside or who had taken it. In the basement, an unfinished manuscript surfaced. Hackman's own handwriting scrawled across scattered pages, forming a memoir of Hollywood's golden years. But it wasn't a nostalgic recollection of his time in the industry. Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's deaths did not merely close the chapter on 2 lives. They opened a new one in the ongoing nightmare of Hollywood's hidden underbelly. Some believe Hackman had stumbled into something far greater than himself, a clandestine society where filmmakers, power brokers, and political titans operated beyond the public eye. A circle he had unwittingly crossed. He had escaped once, but not without carrying secrets that were never meant to be revealed. In the weeks following the case's quiet closure, 3 of Hackman's closest confidants disappeared from Hollywood's spotlight. One of them, a director who had worked with him on Mississippi Burning, packed his bags overnight and left Los Angeles without a word. Journalists attempted to reach out. Even 6-figure offers for exclusive interviews were refused. The silence around Hackman's death stretched wider and deeper, like an unseen force ensuring the truth would never surface. Even now, those who pass by the abandoned home swear they hear whispers in the early morning light. Murmurs lost in the desert wind. Some claim the voices are unintelligible. Others, that a single phrase repeats, soft and chilling, "Not safe here." Gene Hackman's legacy is more than his films, more than his accolades. His name now lingers in the darkness cast over Hollywood, a city built on dreams, yet haunted by buried truths. A place where not everyone who knows too much gets to tell their tale. Hackman did not simply pass away. His story was rewritten in silence, and the message left behind was clear. Those who learn the truth never leave unscathed. Share your thoughts about this video in the comments section.